Hey everyone, it's Friday, April 16th. Welcome to episode 6 of my podcast, Is Breakfast Included? Today on the show, we talk to Patty Palazzo. Now, Patty owns a t-shirt company called Punk Masters, and they make some really cool t-shirts. She's going to talk about how she made her way from Akron, Ohio, all the way to LA to work for a guy who some of us may have heard of, and what eventually led her to start Punk Masters. So, let's get to it. I know who you are, but tell everyone else who you are.
Who am I? Well, I mean, my name is Patty. How about that? My name is Patty Palazzo, or Patricia Palazzo.
Okay.
And I live in Los Angeles, but I'm originally from Akron, Ohio.
Okay. Cool.
I am a graphic designer. Start with that, and I mean, I guess I'm probably known to most, maybe many people that's listening to this, or most people in the Duran Duran fan base, as working with Duran Duran, which actually started with me working with John Taylor back starting about 96, doing design work.
Okay.
And I mean, do you want me to go into kind of like how that whole thing started? Because that led to what I'm doing today.
Okay.
In 95, actually right before I moved out to LA, I was still living in Ohio at the time. And he was starting an independent record label and working on a solo album. This was actually before he officially left Duran Duran for a bit. He was still in the band at the time. And he had an assistant at the time. And I, just in the early workings of the internet, I knew he was starting this label. And I don't even know what got into me, but I contacted his assistant and I'm like, hey, does he have a logo for his record label? And she took me up on putting some ideas together, which was, now that I think back on it, it's kind of ridiculous. But they were working on a whole grassroots campaign and involving fans, to get the word out there and all of that. They weren't on a label. He was starting his own label that wasn't under any other major label. So anyway, I put some ideas together and sent them their way, and they actually ended up choosing one of my logos to use.
Right on.
Which was crazy. That was in the summer of 95. And that was right about the time I was thinking I was wanting to move out to LA, and I had a couple friends out here. And it was at the end of the year. It wasn't the end of the year. It was more in the fall when I came out to LA, and the idea was to look for places to possibly move to, but also John was doing shows with, he had that band started Neurotic Boy Outsiders. They later changed it to Neurotic Outsiders, with Steve Jones and Matt Sorum and Duff McKagan. And they were doing Viper Room shows. And so I was coming out, and his assistant, said, come to the show, we'll meet. And, I guess just kind of hash out the formalities of the logo and all of that. And so, I went out and at that show afterward, and, Beth brought me over to meet John. And one of the first things he asked is, he's like, hey, do you want to do a logo for my band? And I'm like, my band? And he's like talking about Neurotic Boy Outsiders. So it kind of grew from there. I started doing logos for them and t-shirts and merchandise. And that kind of coincided with, it was at the end of that year that I moved out to LA, and ended up just kind of working with John more and more, as it was. Mm-hmm. And then he started to get more into his solo work, and the two of us, I mean, his then assistant at that time, she ended up leaving, and I sort of took over. I kind of did some assistant like jobs, but we started with his, he was releasing a lot of solo work in this period of time in the late 90s, and we put together a website together. It was called trusttheprocess.com, and we basically sold all of his CDs through the website, and we just kind of built this thing that was, this was before Amazon and iTunes and all of that. So, it was a very small audience. It was tricky to try to get that out there at the time. But he did small tours and we did stuff just on a smaller level, but it was a lot of fun. For me, it was like, I went to college for art and design, but it was like going to college again. I just learned so much more.
Yeah.
Working with him and tackling the web. I had no idea what I was doing with half of it.
And all this started from a cold call, basically.
Yeah, basically, which is so, like, if you know me, it's so unlike me, because I'm a bit of an introvert, and I just hate getting on the phone, and let alone like cold calling someone. So when I was 24 years old, I guess it was just one of those things that this is, you kind of know what you want and you just go for it without really thinking too hard about it. Because that was very uncharacteristic of me. And so which is kind of funny.
So you worked with John starting in end of 95, 96, and you worked alongside with him with the Neurotic Outsiders. What happened after that?
Then after that, the Neurotic Outsiders had its moment, but he, kept doing his solo work. Then also kind of coinciding with that in the early 2000s, there's two things that started to go on. One was John's wife, Gila, had this company, Juicy Couture, which many people have probably heard of, clothing company. And she brought me on in the early 2000s, about 2002, 2003. They were still small, but they were starting to get known. But she brought me in to do their main logo and then to start doing some t-shirt logos. And that really took off. And I was doing, just a little bit. So with that, I was never officially like a full-time employee, but I went into the office almost daily and was freelance, doing a lot of the women's logos. And then from that point, they started a men's line, and John and I really took the helm of doing logos for the men's shirts and whatever else they wanted to apply it on. So there was a period there from about 2003 to really 2008 that we were like full on, like, just creating like hundreds of logos for the men's line, the two of us and a couple of other people that they eventually brought in at Juicy. So, that was a huge thing. And also around that same time in the early 2000s, John was getting back together with Duran Duran as the full five-piece band, the original five. And I think we all know where that went. But with that as well, I actually got to start designing graphics with them when they got back together. And I've been doing, things with them off and on ever since, which has been amazing. But with the Juicy thing, that went until about 2008, and they had gotten bought out by Liz Claiborne, and Gila and her partner Pam eventually sold the whole company, and went on to do their next thing, which is called Pam and Gila. But when that happened, that's what gave me, I guess, the shove to start my own line of t-shirts.
And that was around 2009?
Yeah. It was, which my company's called Punk Masters, and it was the fall of 2009 when I launched my first shirts. Yeah.
And let's talk about Punk Masters a little bit.
Let's talk about Punk Masters.
So you started in 2009. Your designs, what do you base your designs on? They're really cool.
Thank you.
I'm not a fashion guy, but when I look
you don't have to be.
I know when I look at them, they got a little bit of fashion, a little bit of punk rock, a little bit of, tell me about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it really came from the genesis came from what John and I did with the Juicy Men's line.
Mm-hmm.
We took a lot, like the aesthetic was taking. I mean, John actually was the one that coined the term punk masters. Because what we did and then what I took from that was taking like these old master paintings, these Renaissance paintings and this old master artworks, and then punking them up. And I remember I had made an anniversary card for John and Gila in that vein. I took this old master painting that I actually knew John was a fan of, but then I, added like this bright pink spray paint to it and really like just kind of punked it up. And when I gave him the card, he's like, "Oh, this is great. It's like a punk master." Oh. And we kind of looked at each other and it was like, "Oh, wow."
There's the
actually
name.
Really, there's the name. So my aesthetic, which grew out of, because that's kind of what we were doing with the Juicy Men's. There was always a bit of humor to it, and there was always, especially coming from John, some sort of music reference. And so I just sort of grew it from that. And, I do still like referring at times to these older works of art, but then, bringing them into a modern day aspect. And finding words or phrases that kind of work with it, something that can, just bring up a little bit of a laugh. That's kind of been my MO throughout all of this.
Right on. And the John, designs, do you do those all by yourself, or does John still have a little bit of a?
He still has he definitely still has I mean, I do I do all the work, but I'll sit down with him and he'll throw out ideas, or he'll look at something that I've done and say, "Oh, this is great. What about change this to that?" Or he's definitely still a great sounding board for me. So there are a lot of some of the logos, like he'll give me the phrase and then I'll run with it and put it together and show him, and he's like, "Oh, that's great." And and then other times, there's some logos that I've just done that he didn't have any involvement in, and then he'll look at it and he's like, "Oh, that's fine. I love that." So I do like to bounce things off him, because I think he's got a great sensibility.
Yeah.
And it's helpful. And we did these series. It's the Duran Bowie mashup series, which started with him coming up with the phrase "hunky dory like the wolf," and like that shirt is so freaking popular, and it's it's got the best of both worlds. and then from that one, he was like, "Oh, what about?" He's like, "Oh, Wild Boys Keep Swinging." So that was the next one. And then the one that I just released, which actually we did almost a year ago. I just, through the pandemic, I wasn't releasing anything new, and I kind of held on to it. But the one I just released was Planet Earthling, and that one's gotten a great response so far from the people that like Punk Masters. But that's fun. It's quirky, and it's got it's a nod to great artists, and I think it speaks to a certain factor of people, and
Well, speaking of this last year, how did the pandemic affect you and Punk Masters and everything else you do? Did your life slow down, or did it just keep going like it was?
For me, I mean, I'm lucky and grateful in the fact that I've always, I'm self-employed and I've always worked from home. So that aspect, it really didn't affect me. And I sell everything online. So if anything, through the pandemic, anyone doing something online, that kind of grew. And business wise, I just kept the shop open, and it just kind of carried on. I suppose there were in the spring of last year, John Taylor was doing these bass series, these tutorial series.
Yeah.
And it was called Stone Love Bass Odyssey. And it was actually based on a shirt that I had designed before he did the tutorials. And, we ended up using that logo for his tutorials. And then from him doing that, it was that was, I think he was doing those in like May and June. And all of a sudden I just started getting like a lot of sales and a lot of interest from people. And, at first I'm like, oh, well, this is interesting. And then I kind of put two and two together and I'm like, oh, of course, because John's doing these things and he's wearing a shirt every time. And it's, the logo was on a shirt. So, that actually really, I think, boosted my visibility.
Mm-hmm.
And I think more people kind of figured out who I was and what I was doing. And so, I have to say it's this past year really hasn't been bad in terms of what I do. Usually every year, like I'll take a few months off and I'll go and visit my family. Got family in Ohio and up in Portland. And I'll, just take time off, close the shop and just go and do that. And I didn't do any of that, obviously, this year. So this was like the first year too that I've had just the shop open and I've just been doing it the entire time with like no distractions.
Yeah.
And, it was, I remember John was always like toward the early part of the pandemic, he's like, look for the silver linings. And I'm like, well, that, was kind of a silver lining in this horrible thing that was happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of those videos,
yeah,
I remember those videos. They were pretty fun. I was getting text from everyone, not just people who like Duran Duran or John, but just other texts telling me like, hey man, I'm watching your guy on YouTube or on Instagram. He's showing us how to play these songs. But one in particular stood out that he's this amazing guitar tech, but he's like, man, I love watching him play, but man, you got to get that cable from his feet. That cable's bothering me. It's all wrapped around his feet. I don't know what's going to happen.
That is hilarious. But that's true though. I remember that too though. There was one time where I think it was wound around his foot.
Yeah. And he just wouldn't let it go. He just kept texting me like, man,
oh, that is so funny. Well, I know when he was starting, I mean, you were a big help in remote teching with him. And Gayla, I think she was the production manager,
I think
filmographer,
they kept it
stylist.
all in-house. Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, those were fun.
Those were fun. Those were a lot of fun, actually.
So I have a couple of questions about your recent launch of shirts and designs. There's, of course, you already spoke about the Planet Earthling one. One that I really like is the Deliver Us from Ego.
Yeah.
Is that one of yours, or is that something? Is there a message behind that? A story behind that?
Yeah, that actually, I've had that graphic, the snake, for quite a while, kicking around, and I've always liked it, but I've never found the right time to use it. I've never found like a word or a phrase that I felt worked with it, and I'm like, well, I could just slap it on a shirt as is, but I just didn't feel it was right. But I just kind of kept it in my folder of future ideas. So then it was, gosh, I can't remember. It might have been last year. John had done this recovery talk with like 6 other people, and they had advertised it, and they were doing it like on Zoom, and then you could watch it on YouTube afterward. And so one evening I thought, well, this will be interesting, and I thought it would be interesting to watch. And I think like Paul Williams was on with them, and then it was another musician, and his name escapes me. But when they were talking, he had used that phrase, "Deliver us from ego," and I was just like, "Holy shit, that is amazing." That's and I had written it down, and I'd written it down thinking, this could be really interesting on a shirt. And they were, and that messaging is as they were talking about recovery, which I that Deliver Us from Ego was amazing, but it kind of works beyond recovery too.
Yeah.
And then, as I was putting this new line together, I had that snake image, and I'm like, oh, this could actually work with that. That just the vibe. I just felt like they worked really well together. And then it was just playing with the fonts. And actually, John kind of helped me narrow down the typeface to use with it, because I had like 5 different typefaces. And he helped me narrow it down to the one that I've used. But that's, interestingly enough, that's where that one came from. And actually I have another logo that came from that same talk as well. There's another one in this new batch called The Elegance of Kindness.
Mm-hmm.
And in that same recovery talk that night, it was Paul Williams had used that phrase, the elegance of kindness. And again, I'm like, oh my God. So I'm like writing down all of these things that I'm hearing, these amazing phrases these people are saying. And I had written that down, and that turned into another logo. And that one, I kind of went through different old paintings and cut out these female characters with animals and put this whole kind of punky collage together with that, and then use that phrase.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. It's really cool.
Yeah, thank you.
And
So that recovery talk was actually really helpful.
And that was Paul Williams, the songwriter. Paul Williams.
Yes, yeah, Rainbow Connection.
Yeah,
yeah.
Smokey and the Bandit.
Exactly. I know. Who knew? He was really cool too. He was really cool on that.
Yeah. I've heard.
Yeah.
Another one that caught my eye was the Commoner's design.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Now that one's interesting, because that actually came from when John and I were doing Juicy Men's logos.
Okay.
We had originally done that in 2004 when they were first starting the line, the Juicy Men's line. And John came up with that. It's based off, many people may know, the Commodore's logo.
I was going to ask, is that
the iconic? Yes.
Yeah, the Commodore's logo.
The iconic Commodore's logo, and John came up with Commoners, and I was like, that's freaking brilliant, but keep it a sketch. Don't make it all high gloss, and keep it common, keep it just a sketch, a pencil sketch.
Yeah.
Which is what I did. I resketched the logo with Commoners. And actually, I remember when we initially did that, I was going to gloss it up and turn, because the Commodore's logo is like silver, and it's very cool looking. And I was going to do that treatment, and he's like, no, Commoners. He's like, keep it common, just keep it just a pencil sketch. That's it. Just keep it rough.
Yeah.
And so that was in 2004, and I think because that was the very, very early days of Juicy Men. So I think it probably got printed on like 5 shirts and, went out to a store. It wasn't very widely distributed yet. So recently John brought up that logo again for something else, and that he ended up not, doing anything with. And so I said, maybe I should release that under Punk Masters. And he's like, yeah, you totally should. So I went back to it, and it actually didn't originally have the circle part that's part of the Commodore's logo. It's like that circle that sort of goes through it.
Mm-hmm.
So I added that. I felt it needed completion. It's like, let's go all the way with it.
Yeah.
And so I sort of re-released it with Punk Masters, because it was, I just thought it was so great, and it really never got out there the first time around.
Yeah. Well, it's a really cool. That's a really cool design. I liked it. Of course, I noticed.
Thank you.
I noticed the similarities between the Commodores and that, but
right.
I wasn't sure that's what you were going for.
Yeah. I mean, and I remember when he first came up with that Commoners. I'm like, that's just so great.
And I guess the next one I'll ask you about is the RBG.
Yeah. Yes. That. I actually originally designed that after she passed last fall. And I was I had intentions of actually had intentions of releasing new designs back then, and as it was, I started coming up with more ideas, and I'm like, well, let's just hold on to all of this until I can do it all at once. And so this actually came out much later than I was planning, but that really was sort of my nod to her, because I is a big admirer of her and what she's done over the years,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
particularly for women and for everyone. And it was just kind of my nod to her. Yeah, my little tribute to her. And yeah, that's.
Oh, cool. I like that
Yeah.
one.
Thank you.
This, how many times a year do you release new designs?
It's random. It's sometimes just once, sometimes twice. It depends on how many I have. I've done it, where as little as if I just have 2 releases, I'll do that.
Mm-hmm.
This was a bigger one, because I held on to a lot more too, and then decided to just kind of hold on to them as I kept doing newer logos to just do one big release. So I really don't have a rhyme or reason to when I do it.
And you print them all yourselves, correct?
I do, yeah, I do. Which
That's
which
the
is
part.
cool.
Is that the part that
But,
John doesn't have anything to do with?
oh yeah, yeah. I mean,
I'll take that out.
That's okay. Yeah, he digs it. He thinks it's cool, and it works out great for him because he's like, oh, can you print up one of these for me? And it's sort of like on demand printing.
Yeah, perfect.
And yeah, and I love it. I've always loved the art of screen printing, just the just doing it.
Yeah.
And I burn my own screens right here. I've turned the closet into a little dark room, and I've kind of taught myself how to do all of that. And it gets a little tricky, as I'm washing screens in the shower, and then I've got to like clean the shower because there's ink stains on it, and that's a drag.
So are they printed to order, or do you print like a mass?
Yes.
So
I wish I could just have them on hand, but it's so hard to predict sizes, like who's going to order what size. And the last thing I want to do is print a bunch and then be stuck with a stack of this size because everybody wanted this other size.
Yeah.
Even after all these years, I still can't like predict.
Yeah.
Like I could print like maybe a handful of each and know I'm safe with that. But I find it just is less wasteful, not wasteful, but I'm not sitting on a bunch of printed stock, by just printing to order. Which it does make it trickier, especially like this go around, because I got probably more orders at once than I've ever gotten.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm sitting here going, how the hell am I going to do this?
Yeah.
You just, day by day, you just have to like do what you can.
And your designs, do you only release them for a certain amount of time, or are they available throughout, any time? Can anyone go
right. I like to keep them available throughout. And then every once in a while, for designs that have been kicking around for years that maybe sell a little slower as well, that aren't quite as popular, I'll just take those down and then, fill it in with the new ones. And then every once in a while, maybe I'll bring an old one back.
Okay.
What I'd like to do, because a lot of times I've reclaimed the screens of the old one, meaning that I've taken the screen and I've stripped the art off and then I've put new art on it. So it's recycling the printing screens. So some of those old designs are like gone unless I burn a new screen. But I like the idea of resurrecting an old one here and there and maybe bringing it back for a limited time. I haven't done that yet, but I always thought about doing that. But yeah, if a design sells really slow, I'll eventually kind of take it off. And then inevitably I'll get an email from someone saying, hey, do you still have this one?
Yeah. As you're reclaiming it.
Exactly. So, it's hard to have so many designs at once, because then it's just, it's hard when you print on to order like that, because then I'm printing one design with one screen. And the process of like setting up the screen, printing, and then cleaning the screen, that could be like 45 minutes if there's like, and I'm printing one design. That's a lot of time for one design, but it happens.
Yeah.
And so that's why if it's a slower selling one, I do eventually take it down. I'm like in deep right now with the new stuff, and what I want to do, because it's hard when I've got so many orders right now and I'm taking care of the printing and shipping side of it, that the social media side tends to slide as I don't have as much time. Because what I wanted to do and what I will do eventually is go through each design, like do a post highlighting each design and explaining it and talking about it.
Yeah.
Kind of what I've done here. So I think it helps sometimes when people have a little background with something.
Yeah.
So, that I want to get to that. And really, I'm just kind of focused on the new stuff right now, for sure.
Yeah. I'm sure that's keeping you busy.
Yeah. One thing that I did that I've done a couple times now is because mostly the shirts that I do are black and white. And then I have a navy t-shirt, but I'll get these random colors, like all different kinds of colors, and print some of the designs as one-off prints, or I'll do 3 of them, or small amounts, and then I put them, what I call it, a sale section, because I just sell them for $16 because they're just sort of like experiments that I do, and that always blows out. Like that blew out fast this last go around. Like I think there's 3 shirts left from everything that I had in that sale section. And I do intend on doing that, possibly again this summer.
Yeah.
Just getting a bunch of random colors and just printing things that just a different color combinations that I normally don't do, but it's kind of fun.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I like the idea of then selling those for just $16. So they're a little less. Just, the fact
kind
that,
of a
maybe
limited thing.
Yeah. And it sort of gives everybody a shot at, if you don't have $30 or $36 kicking around for a t-shirt, but maybe $16 you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And just to kind of reach everyone. Yeah. And it's fun.
You know what has a nice ring to it, Patty, is breakfast included.
Oh, Bernie.
Just going to throw that out
there.
You
need some merch.
If you don't like it, you can throw it right back, okay? I'm joking.
We should print your logo on some shirts.
I don't know.
All right. Well, the idea is out there now, so
yeah.
Let's,
that was the goal.
Yeah. Well, maybe when we meet again on the road one day,
have that limited print of 1.
Yeah. I've done that before.
I'm sure you have.
I've done that for John a couple of times, actually.
See, when I see him, I'm going to say, is that a one-off?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
You're wearing a one-off. That's about it. That's about it. I have a couple more questions for you, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
The name of the podcast is Breakfast Included. So
yes.
I've just been asking a few people this. If breakfast was included, Patty, what would you have?
Oh, good question. There's a few things. I mean, my standard is oatmeal when I'm at home. But if breakfast is included wherever I'm going, if they have, I'm vegan, so if they have a tofu scramble, give me that.
Okay.
Give me a great tofu scramble and a little avocado toast. God, that sounds so just predictable, doesn't it? The avocado toast.
No.
That's like right there. And then coffee, always coffee.
Right on.
Yeah. I haven't had breakfast yet too. I'm really hungry.
I bet I know what you're going to have.
Yeah. My oatmeal.
Well, where can they find you on social media?
My website is punkmasters.com, and I am on Instagram at punkmasters, and also on Facebook at punkmasters and Patty Palazzo, and Twitter at punkmasters. I think, yeah.
All right, it's a lot of social media.
It is.
Yeah.
One tries.
I can barely handle my Facebook.
I know. I mean, thank God for the cross posting. If you post it on one, you can have it post on the others.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
Yeah. I still don't know how to do that.
We try. I know. All the cool kids are doing it. We try.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you taking the time today talking to me. It was really nice to talk to you.
It was great talking to you too.
And maybe we can do this again on your next launch.
Yeah. I am up for it. I'm always up for it. Well, hopefully I will see you.
Let's hope that sooner than later we'll see each other.
Yeah.
Well, have a great day.
But, thank you. You too. And this was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Appreciate you having me.
It was fun for me. All right. Bye-bye.
Cool. All right. Take care, Bernie. Bye-bye.
Well, all right, everyone. That was Patty Palazzo. What a great story, yeah? Go to her website at punkmasters.com and order yourself a couple of t-shirts. Maybe get some stickers. Anyway, thanks for listening this week. And until next week, have a great day.